You really know you're watching Taiwanese New Wave when the camera doesn't move for a very, very, very long time.
Welcome to the Flick Lab. I'm Karri, a Finn living in Malaga, Spain, media assistant by title, and work in IT currently. But most importantly, let's get to our guests of tonight or this morning or however it goes. We're all across the planet at the moment. Well, let's start with Nick.
Hey, how's it going?
Then we have Luke here. Hi, Luke.
Hi, hi everybody.
And of course, my co host, Henrik.
And for the moment, your only co-host.
That's right. Yeah, we had some personal changes here. We had a certain. We were joking that we would forget his name by the next episode that we record. Yeah. Well, okay.
Yeah,
I-
the one who shall not be named.
We had this American co-host here for like 6 months, but unfortunately,
Okay.
he had to depart because he has another podcast going. So
Well,
Remem-
I'll be your token American for today.
All right. So, Luke, would you maybe like to tell a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Hi everybody. I'm Luke. I come from Taiwan, and then I currently live in New York. I have been working with Nick for quite some time, and we really enjoying the day we live in Taiwan, Taipei. So we really wanted to introduce a lot of Taiwanese movie to the audience. So this is why we come here.
Right, you moved to New York quite recently, isn't that right?
Yeah, just the beginning of this year, and with my wife, and because her job is asking her to move to New York for a couple of years, so we decided to move to the United States to live for some time. Yeah.
All right, and then Nick, you're still in Taiwan.
Yeah, so we kind of are in opposite countries. Like I'm an American. I studied film in Boston, and then I did a semester abroad in Taiwan. And then when I graduated, I loved Taiwan so much that I moved out here, and I got a master's degree in international communication and became a freelance editor and started working on films, my own kind of short films, and that's how I met Luke. We worked on a film together, and we liked working together so much that we continued to work together. And then we started a YouTube channel called Mint Volcano, where we talk about Taiwanese films in general, but like also sometimes we'll talk about like other kind of Asian films on the channel.
Right. So we have like a photographer and a director here.
hmm
So, yeah, Mint Volcano. Maybe a little bit about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, so it's like we wanted to, like Luke said, we wanted to introduce Taiwanese films to kind of a Western audience because I think Taiwanese films are not talked about as much, I think, in like the general conversation. At least that's what I find. And we just love movies and we love Taiwan, so it was like, okay, this is a good mix of things that we can discuss on our channel.
Yeah, I saw indeed that you have quite a lot of collaboration, like at least in these. Yeah, I could watch a couple of your short films, and this effects was a pretty cool idea. Quite enjoyed it. Well done, guys.
Oh yeah, yeah. Thanks for watching that. Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
also put short films on the channel that we worked on. So
hmm
Henrik, how are you able to talk about films tonight? What's your credentials? Otherwise, you cannot talk about films, of course.
My credentials are that I'm an alcoholic hobo.
Yeah, you hobo from the
Yeah.
north of Finland.
From the north of Finland, which makes me a professional to talk about Taiwanese New Wave.
As I discovered, and no surprise there, Taiwanese new wave is such of a wide topic that it's impossible, just completely impossible to cover it in 2 hours or whatever we're gonna record tonight because there's a lot of films and so also kind of they don't really follow any specific theme in my opinion that there's kind of like more of the socio political films like A City of
yeah,
Sadness And then there's more like a memory-based films from Ho Shen, for example, Samurai Grandpas,
Yeah.
kind of the early Taiwanese new wave, I would still say, 1984. And then the later films from Ho Xiaoxian I haven't seen, like what's this 2015 film, Assassins, or what's the name?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Ah,
The
Lian
assassin,
Yang.
the assassin.
The Assassin,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, kind of curious about that. But anyway, so we're going to be concentrating on two directors from Taiwanese New Wave sort of kind of movement, if you can call it movement. Some people don't like to call it movement because it wasn't a cohesive movement per se, just a lot of directors having some fun and finding kind of
Yeah.
their voice, I guess. Why only two directors to be discussed for this episode? Well, I thought that it would be at least less heavy to just concentrate on these two directors. I can perfectly see that we could do a second episode about Taiwanese New Wave at some point. And yeah, of course, if you guys at the end of this recording are still willing, you are very welcome to do that in the future.
Awesome.
All right. Henrik, do you want to kind of start this from somewhere?
No. You can feel free and lead us into the discussion.
Thank you
Oh.
for throwing me under the bus. But yeah, so Triple H, as some YouTuber called him. I don't know if this is a common way to call him, but Ho Xiaoxian is the point to start with if we go like in a yearly chronological order here. Ho Xiaoxian, as like Edward Yang, they are both originally from mainland, and then in their early years they moved to Taiwan. Ho Xiaoxian is born in 1947 and is one of the most respected and known names from the movement. If you ask the film crème de la crème out there, he's also one of the most respected directors of all time. And his film A City of Sadness has been in the top 200 lists, etc., etc., and countless awards have been given for both of these directors. In fact, if you go look at these guys' bios on something like Wikipedia, it's basically like these movies were shown at these festivals and they received this and this prize, and it's just like basically a list of winnings at these ceremonies. Yeah, okay, so there were some collaboration as well between some of these directors from the Taiwanese New Wave. Edward Yang and Ho Xiaoxian collaborated at least on the Taipei story. Ho Xiaoxian has sold his apartment at least twice. Once for Edward Yang's Taipei story, in which Ho Xiaoxian as well starred in, and things like that.
Yeah.
I think there's kind of like this brotherly thing going on and very close-knit community and sharing of ideas, but they didn't collaborate that much, did they? Do you get the same feeling? Not that much.
Yeah, you mean after this movement they don't collaborate?
I think even during the movement, I think they while they shared ideas and things like that, I don't think they kind of on the credits collaborated that much together. I might be wrong on that, but yeah, there's a lot of shared themes and ideas.
Yeah, I think you can definitely see like the influence that they had on each other, at least in kind of spirit, and like the way both of their styles definitely feel very similar when you watch their films. And then, like you said, they were, you know, they would help each other by being in each other's movies, and there was this kind of collaboration. But I think that they were very meticulous and like kind of strong directors that had like very clear ideas. So I think that each of their films were like their films, right?
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Makes sense. And this podcast is an interesting beast as well, because we are throwing all the possible spoilers out there when we are speaking about these movies, which in essence means that if somebody's going to listen to this, then we kind of assume, I guess, that they have already seen the movies, which are already hard to find. And so this is for the super cinephiles out there. And once again, it seems that we have chosen a lot of movies for this episode that are completely unavailable, but yeah, there are ways, and because there are no other ways, for example, to find Mahjong, yeah, well, definitely not on YouTube, but definitely yes on YouTube, you can find it there.
Yeah,
Maybe a really short history lesson as well. February 28th incident is a thing also called 228,
Yeah.
which led to a period of white terror. From 1895 to 1945 was the Japanese colonial period of 50 years, when the CCP, the Communist Party of China, started pushing the Kuomintang government, the ROC government, out of the mainland. They were forced to move to Taiwan and mix with the already existing population of Taiwanese. And this caused a bit of clashes. And the mainlanders who came there and the Kuomintang were pretty soon known for the Taiwanese population for their, let's call them rough ways and very rigid. It seemed that the people already had gotten used to the 50 years of Japanese rule in a way that there were some favorable voices towards the Japanese instead of the
Yeah.
Kuomintang at the time.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's an interesting thing to note that a lot of the older generation speak Japanese because they have that kind of favorable relationship with the Japanese. And like there's a lot of Japanese words mixed in with Taiwanese.
Right, yeah. Yeah, you could hear that in City of Sadness as well. They're using some Japanese vocabulary.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, one of the movie is made by Wu Nianzhen Go Dousang. It's about his father, and also his father talking pretty favor in Japan. So also this kind of situation happened a lot in Taiwan's New Ways movie.
Right. But then the entire nation or entire Taiwan was able to hear from the radio the news that there was this February 27th incident, which grew into February 28th incident, to give the short version. And tens of thousands of Taiwanese were killed by the Kuomintang government as a response for they were kind of tired of this repression. Yeah, this started the martial law in Taiwan and officially ended only in the 80s.
Yep.
So 70s, I guess, was a really interesting period because in 71, Taiwan was removed from the UN in favor of the communist China, and people needed to find some kind of means to keep the economy going. And it was apparently pretty interesting times for the middle class, who started to take kind of matters into their own hands because the country was isolated. And in the 80s, it just somehow happened that there were more resources or more money for these new directors to explore and experiment and kind of do their own stories and start filmmaking. And somehow these passed the censors before the, for example, the martial law was lifted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct.
All right. Haven't ruined the show yet.
You got the stamp of approval.
Okay, so, well, let's get the train rolling because we have 4 movies to go, so let's jump right into it. Hou Xiaoxian and A Summer at Grandpa's from 1984. Henrik, your thoughts?
Overall, I found it pretty good film. I did enjoy it a lot. Then again, I don't think that from today's lineup it is it would be the strongest film. From the four films that we cover today, this is my third favorite. And in its kind of a story execution, I found it to traverse the similar threads that you saw a lot in the 80s cinema, like theme-wise. The closest kind of reference point for Summer at Grandpa's, like perhaps the most accessible reference point when it comes to plot structure, would be something like My Neighbor Totoro.
Yeah. Actually, did you read about that there's an actual connection between these 2 films?
Actually, I didn't find that.
Yeah, Neighbor Totoro was inspired by this film. Am I correct on this assessment? Do you know, guys?
Yeah, I had read that same thing, that the film was inspired. And if you look at the plot of the film, you can see a lot of similarities. And even if you look at kind of like the costume choices and the setting and like the way that it looks, there's a lot of similarities there too. So I think that that's probably true.
Right. What's the title in Taiwanese?
东东的假期 like the vacation of Dongdongs.
Right. So it's a little bit different, referring to the kind of lead character. So yeah, this is a story about basically two kids who start to go with their uncle to the countryside where the grandpa lives, and the grandpa is this kind of a doctor figure. Somebody said that this apartment that the grandpa lives in, or the house, it's very reminiscent to Japanese countryside doctors' apartments where people would go for their visits, appointments. That's something that some Japanese director or a movie enthusiast pointed out in a documentary, that there's definitely like these similarities or shared culture between Japan and Taiwan in that way.
Yeah.
For me, it was a pretty interesting movie. Like, what does Ho Xiaxian want to say with this film, if anything, other than that it's a memory? I got the feeling that maybe this is something that once was and not so much anymore. That kind of missing something that has been long gone. What do you think, guys?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much like spot on. I think like in general, like you mentioned, like he is very connected to this idea of memory. I think a lot of Ho Xiaoxian's films have this theme. And then I think the really interesting thing that he does is that he links himself to his form like very rigidly. So he sets up this idea, I think, in this film that this is the perspective of these children, and then the form of the film matches that. And I think the way what he says when he does that is that like this is about this character's kind of coming of age and like realizing what's going on around him. And so I think that what he's trying to show is like the ways in which we mature. So at the beginning of the film, you kind of don't know what's going on, and then towards the end, you realize all these things that are happening around him, like that his mother's sick, and that there's like this kind of affair going on, and that these people were robbed. All this stuff is revealed very slowly, and I think it's kind of showing how over a certain time in your life you just end up maturing very quickly, and you move from being a kid to kind of understanding the world around you.
Yeah, I feel that this film might be even more pertinent today in the age of cell phones and high technology, where I got the feeling that, for example, when a bunch of kids were coming to say hi to Tuntung once they got the word that he has arrived, I'm kind of getting the sense that this kind of a scene would not even happen anymore these days, like that the kids would be
Yeah.
so enthusiastic that, oh, my friend is finally here. No cell phone.
No, not anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah. I almost got kind of, well, I did get a little bit teary-eyed watching this film because of this. But it doesn't kind of have some certain core to follow apart from this uncle who is a bit of a misbehaving person.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think that matches like what you were saying, like what I was kind of saying is like it matches this idea of like of kind of like a memory that a kid would have about a time in summer, right? Like if you were to think back on a summer that you had once, it would kind of come to you in the same way that this film comes to you, where it's like these series of kind of interesting things that have happened to you rather than a real plot, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes I thought that maybe the whole uncle plot is jumping a bit too much to the forefront, unless that there was something that I missed that they tried to convey with that storyline. But yeah, like you said, there's a lot of like childhood elements, like beautiful countryside. You see the trains passing by and swimming, stealing clothes, shitting, all the usual, running naked and getting your ass whooped, and gramophone and all this kind of nostalgic stuff.
Yeah.
And apparently seeing criminals do things and seeing a Taiwanese Elvis type of guy smashing somebody's head in with a rock. Golden childhood memories.
Yeah, I think the director trying to combine all these interesting moments into one summer vacations. I don't think that they would able to happen so much things in just one summer. So
Yeah.
probably they do something like combine together, so make it more interesting, and then all about memories. So it's not really important like how long it happened. It's about it did happen, and it make you change in some time of your life. So I think the main character Dong Dong is really reflecting the experience of Taiwanese people because often in that era, your parent working in the city and your grandmother living in the countryside. So oftentimes you went to their house as a vacation, and especially your parents still working or your parent could not take care of you, so you had to go to your grandfather's house to spending time. So a lot of people sharing this experience. So really interesting because Taiwan is changed, Taiwan is modernized. So this kind of experience should be recalled by a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah, kind of maybe getting some kind of mahjong vibes in a sense that where in mahjong, well, talking about the movie already, but mahjong, it's kind of depicting the clash of maybe outlooks of people in a modern city with the capitalism, and maybe also in grandpas, there's this obviously there's a huge appreciation for the countryside life, maybe this slower life as opposed to the city that they live. I kind of got the feeling that it would be great to do like your own version of this film. Henrik, are you on board? Let's go to my summer house and grab the cameras.
We have been planning on doing something like this, or do a film collaboration
Yeah.
at some point, but nothing ever actually came from that.
What happened to that Matrix film that was supposed to be based on Polish part of World War II?
Well, just the budget alone happened to that. Also, some kind of a Polish hack director kind of sort of made it already.
Hack director. Well, that movie was a little bit of hack, but
that movie was hacked. But something that I kind of appreciated a lot with A Summer with Grandpas was that I found it that the movie works in a certain way as an indirect sister piece to City of Sadness, and I'm stretching the indirectly part here. Obviously, the both films they cover a different era, and therefore they are not strictly linked to each other. But there is the aspect that in Summer at Grandpa's, like Nick stated, essentially it's a coming of age story that is told in a course of one summer. That kind of works like with a City of Sadness. Like if you would warp or flip the periods on their heads, so that in here you have like a coming of age, and then in the City of Sadness you would have like this depiction of that film's universe's modern times, like the topical times of that period. A second thing that I did find actually quite interesting as a unifying theme between Grandpas and City of Sadness is that, like you guys pointed out on when you were talking about the City of Sadness on your YouTube channel, is that film is told very much in the form of individual stories that are kind of put together. There are different stories that happen in the film's narrative, and that's also something that happens in Grandpas. Like with City of Sadness, you have these individual stories that all center around this one family, and you have like different members of that family and what happens to them. You have the story of Tuntun, who comes to spend a summer with his grandpa. You have the story of Tuntun's sister, who forms the connection with the village artist. You have the story of the uncle, and basically how he clashes with the grandpa, and you also have the story of the titular grandpa. So you have depending on how you want to count them, you have like 3 or 4 generations and presentation from each generation, and then you have an individual story, what happens to them in the course of this one particular summer. And that's something that plays out also in City of Sadness in form of the 4 brothers.
Yeah, and yeah, that's interesting. I felt that in A City of Sadness, almost every character, if not every character, has some kind of arc. Maybe not completely finished arc, because these movies of Hou Xiaoqian kind of try to depict kind of a period of time and it starts kind of abruptly and ends abruptly. It's kind of like a
Mm.
snapshot in time.
Yeah.
But what I really enjoy is the richness in the characters, and that it's so inherently concentrating on these characters. He's a very character-driven director.
Yes.
Mm.
Did you feel that there was something missing from this film, or it worked as it is?
In my opinion, it worked as it was. Like, I don't feel that there was anything missing. Some might, of course, criticize the fact that, like you pointed out, Kari, there really is no like narrative center here.
Mm,
It very much is like story A, story B, story C, story D, and then they come together or they work against each other at points, but it's very much like these individual beats.
right.
And the unifying theme is that it's this one summer, and there's a lot that kind of gets dropped, like for example the sister's story very much is like overshadowed by Tuntun's story, and then there's this connection with the village artist, which doesn't go anywhere actually, and it just kind of gets dropped as the film ends. Some might take an issue with this and say that this is a narrative fault. I don't share that opinion, but that of course also for me comes from the place that, like I mentioned, this is something that, for example, in Swedish and Finnish films you saw in certain time periods of Swedish filmmaking. For example, like you have the Emil, Vahtraman and Emily stories and movies based on that also have kinda not a similar structure per se, but
Yeah.
they have kind of the same vibe, where the point of the film is to follow the main character, the titular Emil, in the course of X amount of time, like one summer or 1 year or something like that, and it's just a collage of what happens to Emil in the course of time. So I've kinda already gotten used to that type of narrative storytelling, and so now seeing it in Campus didn't bother me. It might bother some people in the same way, for example, that the similar plot structure or in Totoro also bothers some people. Some people really don't like My Neighbor Totoro because of this fact. So it's kind of, what is your cup of tea? I enjoyed it, and for me, it wasn't an issue.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that assessment. It's like if you take the film on the terms that the film sets up of like that this is going to be this way, where it's going to be these kind of vignette kind of experiences, and you're following the characters, and it's not really about showing this kind of plot driven story, then you enjoy it. But if you kind of are clinging to the idea of like what's the plot, what's going to happen, what's going on, then you might not enjoy it. But you just kind of have to go with what the film wants to do and accept it on its own terms rather than trying to kind of make it into a movie that it isn't.
Yeah. Just give up the conventional storytelling ideas in your head and just let it go. Yeah, then it works the best. There's some humor also in this film, more maybe in Edward Yang's production, but well, I can't say that the hemorrhoids are very pleasant. I haven't experienced myself, but it's used for comedic purposes here. Things like that. Anything else, or do we already want to go to A City of Sadness at this point?
Yeah, we can keep it rolling.
Yeah.
A City of Sadness, yeah. Well, it's gonna be a little more complicated and heavily tied to history. But then again, you made the notion that this is not so much about it's not how to make any kind of a political statement per se. It's just kind of observing the people during those times and how they experienced that from their perspective, just living their normal lives and having to deal with this all kind of external annoyances.
Yeah, that's right. I think that it's more of a like we mentioned in our review of it that when the movie came out, a lot of people were upset that it wasn't more political because it was kind of marketed as this political commentary film,
Yeah.
but it's really more of a character drama that just happens to be set at a very political time in Taiwan's history.
What's actually, I wanted to ask from Luke, what's the general feeling of people towards Kuomintang today? Because the party still exists and is very much, I understand, part of the politics there. So how much does the past of the politics of that party bother them or the nation?
It depends how the generations. In my generation, it kind of passed away. People don't record it a lot. But if it's like my father's generation, the people really, do care about it. And so it's why nowadays Kuomintang is not really able to, be the leading party right now because they do a lot of things that people in Taiwan doesn't really enjoy. Like they take a lot of resource. They take some bad decisions about how to government Taiwan. So yeah, this is real story, and people in Taiwan really could not get over it. So they even think the Kuomintang doesn't really care about Taiwan. They just wanted to take Taiwan as a temporary base to go over mainland China. So even nowadays, people in Taiwan doesn't really trust Kuomintang because they don't think Kuomintang is really wanted to stay in Taiwan. So this is why the political the Minjintang is more supported by Taiwanese people.
Mm.
Yeah, and City of Sadness is written by Wu Nianzhen. Is a script writer, and he basically writing this script in his, I don't know, maybe his personal experience. So pretty good. I mean, I really like the script Wu Nianzhen writing because makes the story really realistic.
Right. What about then jumping into different territory? The threat of China. How do you feel it with these current comments from mainland China trying to pick up a fight? Or is it more of the same? Have you kind of seen it already? Are you worried about it?
Yeah. Oh, well, actually, we didn't think China will take over Taiwan. Even
Right.
now, even the media kind of persuade, I mean, take pressure of, how many China will take military action over Taiwan. But I personally doesn't think so because they just wanted to create an enemy.
Mm.
I mean, the enemy doesn't necessarily real. I mean, I don't know. I just don't think mainland China will take action to Taiwan because they take action. There's no reason they have to take action or ruin Taiwan. There's no benefit for them to take over island which is be ruined. So it's just a way people wanted to stick together with an enemy. I mean, if you create enemy, then you probably have more reason to stick together. This is a
Mm.
political way of having people support political party. So, for me, it's not. I just wanted to make Taiwan better. No, I don't want to create an enemy which might not necessarily to be real. I don't think this is a real threat of Communist Party, but I do think we totally not acceptable to be take over by the Communist Party. We are democratic
Mm.
and we are free. We are country, Taiwan. So we really wanted to keep ourselves integrity. So there's no reason we wanted to be taken over by the mainland China. So we will stick right now, and we will seeking the chance to be a country like normally.
So
So just time to thinking the opportunities till the day comes. So
right. So the dynamics may be a little bit different compared to Finland and Russia, although we both have super big neighbors that become a little bit, how do you say, belligerent every now and then.
That could be a whole another podcast if you want to talk about the political
yeah.
situation. It's another 3 hours.
Yeah, true. But speaking of politics and history, I was telling in the beginning of the episode about the whole February 28th and the White Terror, and this is kind of what the film is all about.
Yeah.
A city of sadness that's surrounding the people, and yeah, I found that the Japanese are painted in a pretty decent light in the film as well, insofar as the film is trying to paint anything. But yeah,
Yeah, I think from the perspective of the characters, they have a good a good attitude towards Japan, because I think the people at that time felt that way.
Yeah. And I feel that after Grandpa's, there's even more of these static shots and even longer static shots. He's starting to get that right. Getting into the. Well, I mean, I love directors such as Tsai Ming Liang. I had a little bit of growing pains when I was getting into this really artistic cinema, and Tsai Ming Liang was one of the directors that I was checking out as my first directors in that
Yeah,
field.
that's a tough one.
Yeah, yeah. We have watched something from Stray Dogs. We watched with Henrik on this podcast from him. But yeah, so we are following this one family and their struggles during this time. How did you feel about kind of the cinematography? Is there anything to know, anything special about that? There's a lot of depth and trying to show as much of the action in one shot as possible. It's pretty impressive for a long
Yeah,
period of time.
Yeah, I think that what he does with the cinematography is like kind of my thinking about him as a director is that he likes to stick to a certain form, whereas he's decided that, okay, I'm gonna take a perspective, and I think as a director he really likes this idea of like third person limited, where it's like he can only see what the characters could see. So he gives you this one shot and he doesn't want to cut around and give you too many angles and too many things to see, because he really wants to highlight the fact that this is a singular perspective and you can only really see it from this side of it. And so that's why he kind of does this static staging that kind of goes through the whole scene. And then what that allows you to do is it allows you as an audience member to kind of notice a lot more in a way if you have the patience and you're looking for it, because he's not telling you what to look at, particularly by like cutting in on something that's important. He's kind of showing it all, and you get a lot of agency to kind of say, okay, what am I going to focus on? What am I going to notice? What are the things that are going to stand out for me?
Yeah, it's interesting in general in at least, let's say, the Japanese films from, for example, the 90s and Taiwanese cinema here, is that they have in common that they have a lot of full shots, long shots, whatever, taken from a distance and holding it for a long time. In Japanese case, I don't know if it's more like a economical thing to do or why they pull that off, because it's not often that impressive in those cheap Japanese films from the 90s that I've seen. For example, the horror genre. But they do that, and they barely have any close-ups in many of them. Yeah, it's something that
Yeah, it might be like working together, where like they have this limitation and then they decided to build up a style around the limitation that they set for themselves.
Yeah, it could be. I remember when we were talking about The Ring, the American and Japanese versions, how there's like a noticeable lack of close-ups or different shot sizes in many scenes that are supposed to be horrifying, and it's a totally different way of depicting those same scenes. So
Have you seen a film called Cure?
I have, yeah, long time ago.
Yeah, I think that is like the best version of what you're talking about with Japanese horror, where they set it. They it's the same kind of thing, but it's done very well. Where it's like it's kind of more of like an arty horror film, and it's similar to Ho Xiaoxian in that way, I think.
Okay.
The way of cinematography, yeah.
There's a lot of contrast that the director seems to put on the table. Some of these may not be so fully meditated, but they are there anyways. For example, in the beginning of the film, we have this contrasting of Hirohito's declaration over the radio with the woman giving birth. So kind of the daily struggles shown there in a pretty masterful way of contrasting these lives of the ordinary citizens against the people in power. Quite nice framing in this film as well. Trying to put as many layers in a shot as possible. I think, Luke, you enjoy doing that as well, kind of framing and giving like a crazy depth to some of your pictures, some of those architecture pics and stuff like that. And the beauty of the country is given some focus. There's these walks around the mountains and fantastic soundtrack, by the way. There's not a lot of it, but what you hear here is pretty iconic stuff. And you kind of noted about the possible silent film love, right? There's these title cards when
Oh
our lead
yeah.
character is writing the notes because he's deaf.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty interesting thing to note is like how it takes on that silent film kind of vibe, but it's motivated by the fact that one of the characters is deaf and writing these notes. And Luke told me that Ho Xiaoshen is like really in love with the old silent films of Taiwan.
Yeah.
There's this short moment of reference to September 18th, which I believe is about the Manchurian incident. And yeah, that is quickly glanced over. And I kind of felt that also the February 28th is pretty fast. It's talked about in pretty quick fashion, and it's not emphasized. And there's some scenes where there's fighting, not in the tens of
Yeah.
thousands or anything. There's just a couple of dudes on the street, and they are beating each other to death.
Yeah.
So this was something that was also criticized about the film, that it's not giving enough serious focus on this. But
Right. Yeah, it's a film that's supposed to be about 228 and then you never see 228 happen, which I think
Right.
is a pretty gutsy move as a director where he has decided that he's not going to show it because he wants to stick with the perspective of his characters. So, it's this major event that really affects everything that happens in the film, but you don't even see it. You kind of hear it secondhand over the radio. I think as a director, he doesn't like to beat you over the head with anything. So it just kind of, like you said, it kind of goes by. And
Yeah.
if you catch it, you catch it, and if you don't, you don't.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that the film kind of chooses to focus more, I felt, on the smuggling mafia, the smuggling operations than the government or whatever is going on in the background. There's these smugglers, and yeah, February 28th, quickly glanced, and that's it.
Oh, correct me if I'm wrong, Luke, but I think one of the things that he was trying to say was kind of show the connection of like how corrupt the government was, because the smugglers will use like the government basically as like a pawn in their gang operations. So if somebody messes with them, their gang, in a way they don't like, then they'll go tell the government, "Oh, hey, this guy's a communist, so go take him away as like payback."
Yes,
So I think
exactly.
Right, yeah, there's a couple of these scenes where somebody's reading this book or that book or doing something that might land them into trouble. Uncomfortable feeling is all around the film for these characters.
which I think also gets augmented by the way that he decided to shoot it with this like far away shots,
Yeah.
which is something I mentioned in the review. Is like it gives you this vibe of somebody watching you, like an informant is always kind of watching you from, like you mentioned, the different kind of levels like in the framing. So it gives you the sense that you're very far away and you're spying on somebody and picking up this information that you can use against them later.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's kind of like somebody silently observing, kind of like getting the creepy vibes that it could be somebody who's out to get you, or
Yeah.
yeah, just watching from a distance.
Oh yeah.
Did you get that feeling, Henrik?
I see where that feeling is coming from. I myself didn't experience it.
Right. And was there something about this camera possibly being? I think it was your idea, Nick, that this camera could be depicting the memories of the children of those times, kind of observing their parents.
Yeah, I think that was another idea I had thought about, because often the angle is kind of a little bit lower. It's a little bit and also it like with Samurai Grandpa's, there is a lot of kind of disjointed feeling to some of the scenes. So in my mind, I think that this might be the pieced together memory of a child that viewed these events and then grew up later, and so you're the viewer as are this perspective of this child. And I think that's kind of also supported by what Luke said, is that this was written by Wu Nianjian and it's kind of about his memories. So
Yeah. Yeah, not a very accessible film, really. You need, like you said, it's clear that you need to read a little bit about, do your due diligence, I guess, before you jump into this film, even so that you can fully enjoy what you're witnessing. Because there's not a lot of title cards. Well, there's something in the beginning and in the end, but yeah, you can't really understand the proceedings here unless you know a little bit about the history.
Yeah, I actually don't side with that notion. I didn't think
Okay.
that this film is really that hard to get into.
Mhm.
There are some historical events that you might miss if you don't know about the Taiwanese history. Perhaps the biggest things being the exact exchange of power from the Japanese overrulers to the Chinese, and then the 228 incident.
Yeah.
Those perhaps being like the biggest, but at the same time, since the film pays so little attention to the political realities that goes on in Taiwan during the time period that the movie is depicting, and it's more focused on the family and the four brothers. Even more than that, to the three brothers, because the fourth one is well kind of just wallpaper essentially.
Mm.
So what you then like if you come into this completely fresh perspective, knowing nothing about the Taiwanese history, what you are left with is an period piece going around or revolving around three brothers, and then a pretty easily understandable societal context, like for example the Stasi-esque police operation, nicking people from the street for undisclosed crimes. Basically, the institutional power and institutional violence held upon an individual, which is a universal concept, very easily understandable concept, and therefore I really don't think that you there is that high of an entry barrier into the movie.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That was some of the criticism when it came to the reviews on the film, at least at the time. But yeah, what is certain is that there is very, 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 very low knowledge in Europe, I would say, regarding Taiwan. So that might have,
Overall, like knowing anything about the East during the 30s, during the 40s. Well, I would say overall.
yeah, which might have been affecting also the popularity of the Taiwanese new wave, because it really didn't break through except for EE, which was popular and everybody was ecstatic about that film. But other than that, nobody knows about the Samurai Grandpas in Europe.
Right.
Yeah.
But that can also be just your common, well, foreign film problem that all foreign movies face. It kind of circulates. I've noticed that what country actually gets the foreign movie kind of a perspective, that the light shine on them. Like now it might be Polish film, then it's a French film, then it's Korean movies.
Yeah.
Well, now we are having the Korean wave thanks to Parasite, and it's going to shift. Like it jumps from country to country, and the country that is on the spotlight, well, gets all the praise. Well, all of a sudden, the entire world finds like tons of great directors from that set country, and all of the other countries around the world just, well, they don't actually get anything.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we need to move on to Mahjong, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah. Obviously, this is a bit of a wild card here because there's a lot of other movies that I could have chosen for this episode. But when I started to watch these films, and I just thought about the simple favorites of mine at this moment, I haven't watched every possible Taiwanese new wave film or anything like that. But I enjoyed this quite a bit, and it's been receiving also some criticism. But yeah, it's also seen by many as a masterpiece. Like, I guess all of Edward Yang's films are more or less
Yeah.
masterpieces. So there's this scale of EE and then everything else. So everything, I guess, gets a little bit shadowed by EE in his projects. But yeah, how about Luke? What did you think about Mahjong overall?
I really enjoy it. It's one of the happiest movie of Edward Young because the ending is kind of comedy. I think it's good.
Yeah.
It's a happy ending. It's not common. You can see in Edward Young's movie.
Yeah.
And it's really talking about transition in modern era, like especially Taiwan is from in the nowhere become big city, especially Taipei. So there's a lot of conflict between internationally and the people living in Taipei, Taiwan has kind of feeling about what they should be believe in their life, like what they should follow. Because in this movie, the main character is following really simple piece of philosophy, like thinking with your head, not your emotion. So, but at the end, the doesn't come this way. Sometimes the emotion, the feeling is more important than just reasonable thinking. Sometimes it give you hopes, give you a reason to live. So it's really romantic kind of film, I think, in terms of Edward Young's work.
I just think it's interesting that Luke says that it's like a romantic and happy film of his, because I think there's this dialectic within Edward Young as a director and probably a person. If I knew him, I don't know, but he's very pessimistic about human nature, but he's also very sentimental and hopeful. And I think this film kind of does both, and there's both sides of it. Like, it's really, in some ways, a really angry movie that's very pessimistic about human nature and the way that people treat each other and the way that society is set up. But it also has, like Luke mentioned, this kind of happy ending, sort of, where the two main characters get together. And
Thank God.
and I think that is what he wants to say, is that, like, if you just allow yourself to be sentimental, then maybe you can kind of break out of this terrible cycle of taking advantage of each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this ending really kept me on my toes. Like, please have a happy ending for this one at least, please. And there it was. I was so relieved and happy. I felt that it's quite pessimistic still, but a very,
I
very
agree.
clear and fascinating split between the people who care and the people who don't.
Yeah.
The capitalist pigs, let's say, and then the people who still have emotions left. Henrik, I guess you
Yeah.
have a lot of thoughts on that.
What exactly? The capitalism or the film in question?
Well, what do your notes say about capitalism? Capitalism, evil, evil, evil.
No, God heavens, Kari, with you it has to be capitalism, great, great, great. Just pollute fucking everything.
Yeah. Balloons and happiness in multicolor.
But yeah, Mahjong came out in 96. So very much the society that we are, at least if you ask me, the society that we are looking at here would be the Taiwan following the kind of economic boom of the 1980s. And like after the point, perhaps when the four Asian tigers were kind of named or formed, like on the brink of the Asian financial crisis. So somewhere in the economic breaking point. With that, it's not exactly the main question that the film asks, at least in my opinion, which is the what we lose with capitalism and with the economic might that we are now receiving versus the more traditional but not as rich history that we have had, and the clash between the modernity and something that we had in the past. That's in my opinion is kind of like the thematic core of Mahjong. It's something that we have witnessed in the podcast previously. Like, this is the same debate that, for example, Akira has going on behind it. Like, we have the technological and the economic boom, and at the same time, what does it mean for the society, and is it a good or bad thing? In Akira, it manifested through rampant technological advancement and moral corruption. In here, it manifests mostly in form of moral corruption. Pretty much every character in Mahjong that we follow is some type of a crook or at least a petty criminal. And as a film altogether, I have to say it wasn't exactly my cup of tea.
Okay.
It makes an interesting contrasting piece when you look at when you look at Mahjong and then look at Yi Yi. Where Yi Yi, I took that. I started to experience that this is a director that is very, very strong on the dramatic apartment. Like when he's dealing with drama elements, that's his forte. And Yi Yi, pure drama and really, really stellar filmmaking. So Mahjong would be kind of the branching out feature for him. Something where he goes, he stays in the drama still, but he also branches out into crime movie, into comedy. And I just didn't feel that ended up working here. It's a brave attempt, but at the end of the day, unfortunately, if you ask me, kind of futile. I do believe that if the director would follow, kind of make a second attempt to do this kind of a dark comedy, something in for example, the Coen brothers esque sentimentality, that is something that I did find or something that I did think when I was watching Mahjong, that this is an attempt to do something like that. Or do a similar type of film to, for example, Coen Brothers dark comedies. On a second attempt, I do think that it could perhaps work better, but unfortunately, with this film, I kind of have to side with the critics.
And Nick, did you get any? This might be a bit wild stretch, but still, was it in '93 or '94? Pulp Fiction came out, and I got kind of similar type of shot ideas from, for example, when this guy with the cap, whose father has killed himself, he goes and shoots this business guy, and
Yeah.
maybe, yeah.
No, I think it's It's really interesting. I disagree that I mean, it's just personal preference, but I actually really enjoy this movie, and I think it's interesting when you've seen his other works that this is like a comedy. It kind of took me by surprise that all the comedic elements,
Yeah.
and I think it's interesting that you mentioned Pulp Fiction, because while I was watching it, I was thinking maybe I'm just getting too meta with the way that he thinks, but I almost felt like it was mirroring. He was doing like a weird kind of, he's talking about globalization in this film, and then at that time that was the type of film that was popular, was this kind of, violent, kind of sardonic movie where people kind of have these kind of inane blathering conversations, and that's what he does with this. And in a way, I almost feel like he's using that as another element to talk about how globalization is affecting everything. It's even affecting the way this movie's being made, because I imagine probably some of the financing came from him being like, hey, this is like a Pulp Fiction thing, and we have this crime and we have this comedy elements. And so it's kind of mirroring this thing of like, these markets are affecting everything we do, and it's even affecting this film. I mean, I think the ending where there's this bloody murder is done very tongue-in-cheek, like the way that the guy, one of the characters, freaks out and shoots this guy, and he keeps shooting him over and over and over and over again. I get the sense that Edward Young is doing this to like mock the audience, being like, how many times do you want to see this guy get shot? Do you want to see it 10? Do you want to see it 20? Like, I'm just gonna go give you what you want, because you are just eating the slop. Like that's kind of the way I feel about it.
Yeah, and in general,
Yeah.
maybe the kind of dehumanizing element is pretty strong here. For example, this Marcus guy, Martha is listening to what Marcus is saying about these other people. Basically, these people do that, and these people do these things, and these people this, and that the future of Western civilization lies right here. It's basically completely discarding the population and taking the feelings out of the equation. And at that point, Martha is like, yeah, I'm out of here.
Yeah. And one more thing, sorry. It's just that I think that if you do take it that way, of like, it's a kind of a mocking of these kind of slick, like Pulp Fiction or something like that, then when you put the sentimentality back in, I think that makes that commentary much stronger, because those films are very unsentimental. And so it's taking that film, this kind of like these cool 90s kind of crime films, and then putting a sentimentality back into it, which I think is very important to Edward Yang.
Yeah, and a lot of parallels, like the bordel nature, if you will, of the capitalism, and then there is this one lady who's trying to get Martha to do the kind of bordel life to keep
Yeah.
afloat in the city. And the film repeatedly makes the statement that there's something ominous about kissing, that you shouldn't do that, or you're wasted, basically. You're gone, and you're ruined. So it's
Yeah.
these guys are avoiding the feelings as much as possible.
I mean, I think it's really, I love the way that he, Edward Young, introduces ideas like that, because I think in one way it could be kind of heavy handed, but because he introduces this kind of theme of like, okay, don't kiss because it's bad luck, it comes early in the film and it's kind of like a joke, and you don't really know that this is such an important element. And then later it comes back with this other character who kisses the woman and then ends up falling in love, and then you see, oh yeah, if you kiss somebody then you're gonna ruin your life because emotions will take over. And then at the end of the film you have this kiss, and you see like, oh, actually this is kind of the point of the film. It was like giving yourself over to emotions. I just think he puts these things in subtly throughout, and then as you watch it you end up slowly realizing what is going on. And I think Edward Young is very good at doing that throughout all of his films.
Yeah, so whereas all the people who were out to get some lady for kind of a one night stand or whatever, and not having an emotional kiss, those guys will be ruined
Yes.
easily. But by the end, I don't think Martha and Lun Lun are ruined. It's
No.
the kiss is for the right reasons.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
Because I don't really know why there's no mahjong in the movie, right? Am I wrong?
There's one scene where they play mahjong in the hostel. It's like in the background they're playing mahjong in
Oh,
the hostel.
right.
Oh, yeah, right.
But why Edward Young wanted to call this movie mahjong? There's
That's a
no
good
reason.
question.
Maybe it's
I
something
could not
about the
find
mechanics of the characters. Yeah.
Or maybe it's really interesting. So
Just the only thing I can think of is that when you play mahjong, you are hiding your hand, right? You don't want the other people to know what you're looking for, and everybody is trying to get some, like the game of mahjong is you're trying to get a win by somebody else putting down a tile. So if somebody else puts down the tile you need, you can take it from them. They lose, you win. It's a
Yeah.
zero-sum game. So I think that this is kind of mirrored in the way that the characters think about life, is like, life is a zero-sum game. I need to get what I need from him, and I can't show him what I want, but I need to get it. I still need to get it. So I think that's kind of maybe what he's talking.
Yeah, one more
Maybe.
point about Martha and Lun Lun. They are the outsiders, even though Lun Lun lives in the city. But Martha is also kind of, they are both outsiders. They are emotionally outside of everything that is happening around them. So that kind of strongly connects them. One question about this Hong Kong character. He's kind of being treated as a sexual object by the ladies and everybody.
Yeah.
And what's happening with the food that they are feeding to him? Is it poisoned or what happens there? Did you get that?
Oh, it's a scene where they're forcing him to. They want him to eat,
Yeah.
and then he's eating, right, and then he starts to choke. I think, I don't think it's poison, but I think the idea was that they were just kind of like he didn't want to eat, and they're trying to force him to do what he doesn't want to. So I think it was supposed to be kind of a metaphor for them fucking him in a way that they didn't want to. So they were forcing him, and so I think that he was trying to show the sex without showing the sex. That's at least what I took out of it.
Right.
yeah, and I think the reason he cried is because he's in love with one of the woman, Angela, and in the end, Angela ending up bring her friend to him to ask him to amuse them, so which make him really sad.
Yeah.
So he choked. He just angry, and then all of a sudden he just cried out. So
Yeah, this is the there's this eating scene, and then there is the sort of a toilet scene where he's crying there. And,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
little
yeah,
Buddha
yeah,
is
yeah.
like, did you go kiss somebody? And I guess he really didn't. He was just hurt by these ladies. Right.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
The one thing that I really was interesting that Luke mentioned to me before we were talking about it was that he didn't like some of the acting from the Chinese actors, and
Chinese
I
actors.
actually and I actually didn't like the acting from the Western actors.
Right.
I thought Marta was okay, but I thought Marcus was really. I mean,
Oh,
it was real painful at some points, and his Ginger, the character of Ginger, some of the acting was just really just very sterile and very weird.
yeah. Was it bad acting from the Marcus actor, or was it just that I really disliked the character in the film? At
Right.
least, yeah. He sounded pretty
Uh,
literary, right? Something really stiff about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just I don't know. It's interesting because I don't know if it was some kind of choice, but also it was hard to watch, especially at the start of the film when it was mostly the like Marcus interacting with people and you just think, "Ugh, I can't watch this guy."
Somebody made the point that maybe it is partly intentional to make them kind of
Mm,
stand out as the people who are maybe not comfortable and not in their home zone or something like that.
yeah. I definitely think that Edward Young does things with a lot of intention, so that makes a lot of sense.
Right. All right. I guess we need to move on to EE. How about that?
yeah.
Right.
That's another 3 hours, right?
Pretty much. Oh boy, where to start this? EE film from 2000, the second Edward Young film of tonight. Oh, well, we're again going around this one family basically and what's happening around them in 3 generations. And maybe it kind of the differences between these generations and everything about life and death and what is meaningful and what is not. Pretty much a sister piece to Mahjong spiritually, I would say.
Hmm.
Henrik, have you seen this before?
I haven't. From today's lineup, Gigi is the most accessible film in Finland. This is like
Yeah.
the Taiwanese movie that actually breaked in Finland or got a relatively noticeable distribution. It's something that the Finnish public TV network Yle likes to showcase to you every now and then. It's kind of a repeated schedule viewing, and it also got mildly wide DVD release in Finland. So the one that you most easily walk across if you're just browsing movies and you happen to live in Finland. But I still somehow managed to miss this one.
Something that jumped at me in the film is that every time there is some kind of a gathering, there's weddings, there's funerals, or some other parties, and every time there's somebody to ruin that party. Some kind of a gate crasher ruining the evening. Nothing is really going according to plan. Breaking kind of the, how did they describe it in the film? The serenity or whatever that is broken.
Hmm.
So this film would be the one to show the aliens, Nick, right? This is the film you would
Right.
show them.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to begin to talk about because I think it just covers such a wide breadth of the human experience. You know, there's it follows the family, so it has the advantage of kind of following all these different characters all in different stages of their life. So you see kind of the struggles that each of these characters goes through, and it's a struggle that's kind of unique to the time period or the person that they are, and you kind of see all these different emptiness that kind of can develop in a human in modern life. So you know you have the father kind of pining over a lost love, and then you have the mother kind of feeling like she's useless, and then you have the daughter kind of not knowing who she is or what she wants to be, and having a friend who she kind of thinks is a better version of her. And so you have all these different conflicts, and I think it really, if you look at it as a whole, you really feel like, oh yeah, that's that kind of longing and that emptiness is exactly what it means kind of to be a person. If I wanted to show aliens what it was like to be a human, I would show them this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, this is clearly the most well-known, I would say, of the Taiwanese new wave cinema movement.
Now, perhaps outside of Ang Lee.
Yeah. Eat, Drink, Man,
Right.
Woman. I was kind of contemplating, should I bring Eat, Drink, Man, Woman into the podcast? And I was like, well, you know, if we bring in Mahjong, it already has the kind of humor aspect there.
Right.
So, and yeah, two directors, as I said, is kind of enough for
Yeah, I
now.
think sticking to two directors is a good one.
Mhm.
And yeah, in other random facts, Eddie Ko is returning as the soldier in this film, in that bar or restaurant, who was playing the character of Lun Lun in the previous one.
Yeah, and Unian Jian is the main actor who is bit parts throughout the other films. He plays one of the gangsters in Mahjong, and he also is a character in City of Sadness as well, and he wrote City of Sadness.
Mhm.
Sadly, Chang Chon hasn't really played in any other movies. He was playing the Yang Yang in the film. And also a pretty impressive performance, I would say, for a kid who was like, what, 5, 6, 7 when doing this film? Really young anyway. And
Yeah, yeah, he's got the kind of the star character arc. I feel like he's got the most enjoyable character arc, and I think the name Yang Yang is like a clue that this is what Edward Yang sees as like himself, right?
speaking of names, Luke, would you care to explain us the meaning of EE?
Why call EE?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of explanations. I mean, sometimes some people say it's because number two in Chinese character is combined with two one, right? And but still, even a couple stick together, they are still separate. Each one has individual. They are all feel lonely sometimes. So
Kind of two
which
lines. Yeah.
means kind of two lines, yes. So which means even you married, even you have some relationship with someone else, it's still you alone. You still the loneliness is still in your life. There's no way you can escape from it. So some people say EE is because even two is two one. So
Yeah.
well, it's one explanation, and I feel well, yeah, probably true. Is it? Yeah,
Together, but always separate.
yeah, right.
Yeah, something like this. And the English title is A One and a Two.
One and then the two, yeah.
Yeah. Henrik, what do your notes say about EE? Let's use them. But I think we usually just skip over. I just go on and we skip like 80% of your notes, so go ahead.
Mostly whenever we have a guest, because I have the policy that whenever we have a guest appearing, I wanna have the guest have the spotlight, so I keep my mouth shut. But I found that well, first of all, like I already stated, I liked this one way more than I actually enjoyed Mahjong. But I did find Yi Yi as a quite interesting kind of a carryover piece from Mahjong when it comes to the theme of this kind of a spiritual or intellectual corruption that the monetary wealth can have on you. In Mahjong, like already mentioned, all the characters are crooks, but they're also the crooked nature kind of comes in hand with these visual implications of a kind of this Western capitalistic corruption seeping into Taiwan. Like Kari mentioned, there was Marcus who was just talking about these people and how there is so much possibilities to be gained in Taiwan, and it's just a like a code bar that you can just hack pieces for yourself. One of the main characters' father was mixed up in some type of in a construction scheme revolving around the kindergartners. But there was also like one of the repeated meeting points, and for some characters the only meeting point was the Hard Rock Cafe, and also the character of Ginger, who was essentially running a hostess service. So there was like these Western elements in Mahjong, and the corruption was very heavy with the Western elements. Came hand in hand with those. And in GG, we once again Young revisits the idea of the emotional and moral harm that capitalism can have on you, but this time it centers around the it's no longer through the Western characters. Now it's purely the Taiwanese characters, and especially in the form of the video game corporate shenanigans that revolve around the main character, who is part of a company that, well, is not directly trying to con its customers, but is really heavily pushing into conning a one video game developer so that they can kind of just produce quick and lazily done knockoff video games, and just tries to ride with similar type of name.
Right. Yeah, I tried to bring to the episode as large of a palette as possible. Like Grandpa kind of about the memory, and then City of Sadness about history, and Mahjong about corruption, and the EE about generation gaps and whatever else.
Yeah, Yi is kind of a corruption plus the generation gap plus the fleeting memory aspect.
Right.
Yeah, I think you can see again, it's not as overt as in Mahjong, but you can see again kind of the contrast within Edward Young of his like sentimentality and his pessimism and kind of nihilistic worldview about everything, where there's a lot to be upset about in the modern world and there's a lot to feel alienated about, but there's also a lot of joy and kind of connection you can find, like the way that the main character kind of develops a friendship with the Japanese game developer that ends up getting conned, or you know, the way that the Yang character is able to kind of use art to kind of create meaning. So I think that he, in this movie, he does it the most masterfully, and like the most you see this kind of contrast in a way that isn't as overt, and it's just kind of, it's the subtlest and probably the best done. I think he really developed into, this is like the culmination of his development as a director, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing to note as well, it's not only Triple H who is pulling all these funny juxtapose scenes. For example, when this child or the daughter and the mother get stabbed, I believe, then it's juxtaposed with this video game where somebody's getting beaten up. So
well, actually, that's an interesting thing. Is like that is kind of a. Have you ever heard of like the Apple Daily, the newspaper? There's this thing that they do where they like take the news and they make like 3D renderings of it. So they'll like take like these violent news stories and then they'll make these kind of weird, like almost funny cartoon 3D renderings of the incident and show them. God. So it's a way that they can show the violence with like, and kind of put it on TV and get away with it. So I think that's what he was trying to do in that, was kind of, and it's another way of showing like kind of the weird modern society and how fucked it is like by showing this like. Right. But yeah, that really does happen. They do show like violence in that way.
All right, I guess we need to keep moving. So let's get to the quickies. Does Henrik want to start here?
Well, yeah, why not? So, the first question, and let's really start with the quickies and not get to the longies yet. Quickly, guys, bring attention to some very small role in the film that you find somehow worth highlighting. Can be good or bad, or just a bit player, some side role character who just really caught your eye.
So I think it's throughout the movies, I think it's interesting that Edward Young shows up as the dad in Summer at Grandpa's, and then Wu Nianjian, who's also a director, shows up in City of Sadness and in Mahjong. And I just think it's a cool thing to note that the directors were all kind of playing parts in each other's movies, and it gives this like cool collaborative vibe to the Taiwan New Wave, and it shows like that the filmmaking atmosphere at the time these movies were made must have been like pretty cool, and like, you know, that they were all kind of helping each other and like having fun with each other, and like, hey, come play the dad in my movie, or hey, I'm gonna be a gangster in your movie. And it has a really kind of just a warm, friendly vibe to it that I really makes me feel good when I watch the movies.
Yeah, quickly before anyone else can also state this, I also have to steal, Nick, from your point about the directors visiting each other's films. I myself, I have to confess, I didn't actually notice that before I read about it. And after that, I revisited the movies and was like, "Oh yeah, hey, wait a minute." So they do, and I too really liked that aspect. Kind of reminds me of Takashi Miike's cameos in, for example, Eli Roth's movies or Quentin Tarantino's visits in Takashi Miike
Yeah.
films.
As far as kind of like leading actors, I would maybe point out the Yang Yang actor. I right now forgot his name, but I give it to Yang Yang and something very small as a role. Well, I guess I need to go back to Grandpa's because the Grandpa himself, like, there is this one pretty legendary and amazing shot where he comes back up the stairs and stops the kids on their tracks just with his cold gaze. What are you doing on my floor? I really love that moment. He doesn't need to say anything, just solved.
I come up with my mind is the one yelling to Lun Lun, the one called Ya Gao, and with a bald head. At the end of the mahjong, he kind of yelling to Lun Lun like why you kind just for me it's kind of odd because there's no reason to yelling someone with no reason that you need him, but you're yelling at him. But this turns out with Lun Lun to realize, oh, Marty also yelling at me, so maybe she needs me. So this is good transition for me to, oh, he turns to be, because in my observation is, this kind of section is weird for me. The performance pretty odd because when you ask someone to help, you don't yell at someone, right? But in the end, it turns this kind of yelling things to be the aha moment to make them realize the truth the Martin needs him. So for me, this kind of smart move for me because in the whole movie, the one Yagao always yelling to someone else. He just performed really I don't understand, but it turns this kind of personality to a driven moment for London. So interesting.
Sorry, what was this character?
think this.
Yagao the
I think he was
Mahjong.
called Little Buddha in Mahjong.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Little
yeah,
Buddha.
of
Yeah, right.
course. Yeah, funny character.
So, guys, what resonated with you the most or the least? Your choice.
The humor and the glimpse into the history and society. Yeah.
The way that kind of human nature was depicted throughout the films and kind of capturing all the sides of the human experience for me.
Yeah, it's about human nature and the time, the era, the history, the political change.
Yeah, I too could take a note from Luke, and my answer also would be the time period depiction.
Yeah.
In one adjective, how would you guys describe the 4 movies that we have been talking about?
Haha, very funny, Henrik. How do you put these films into one adjective?
I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
I would say literary.
Literary.
Yeah, like there's a very kind of literary kind of vibe to the films. Like I think a lot of the new wave films have this kind of novel feeling to them. That's the only kind of thread between them that I could find.
Maybe kind of eye-opening, but maybe I'll just go with meditative in a way.
Yeah, well, really difficult for me because I'm not good at English. But for me, this for Taiwanese new wave movie, I would say is a reflection because people in Taiwan living in Taiwan, especially Taiwanese new wave. Before Taiwanese new wave, there's no movie talking about ourselves. It's about a movie of entertainment or like fight back to the mainland China. And till Taiwanese new wave, Taiwanese people finally have the opportunity to reflecting their own life. Like there's finally some director, some movie talking about, oh, this is Taiwanese people's life. So it's good opportunity for Taiwanese people to kind of reflecting themselves. So this is my life. This is my life. Is I live in in this kind of situation should I think about myself? So yeah.
Perfect. Reflective, I guess we can use that. Yeah.
And I would say sorrowfully warm.
Mm.
So, this is going to be a hard one. You can pass if you want, but were there some favorite quotes that you found from some film?
I can give it a shot.
Go ahead, you absolute madman.
There's a lot, but this was fun. Allison, would you please wait for me here? I'll be right back, okay? Sure. Hey, Marcus, don't bother coming back, you lying son of a bitch.
Were you playing the film? That's exactly how the acting was.
Yeah,
That was harsh.
but yeah.
One of the quotes that I really like from the character of Redfish is when he's talking. He's just saying that people don't know what they want. You have to tell them what they want. And as I was watching it in Chinese, the way that he speaks, I was watching it with my wife, and she was laughing because she was saying, "Oh, he has a lot of 废话," which in Chinese means like bullshit talk, like just saying things to sound profound for no reason. So I just think that a lot of his 废话 was very interesting.
Yeah, I like the quote too. Well, I would say I was wanting to just let Nick the sentence but I would choose the other one. Like maybe the word Yi say, well, because you could not see your bag, so I take photo of your bag so you can see it. Yeah, right. This is pretty interesting because I'm a photographer, right? I really wanted to take some picture with
Yeah.
someone doesn't really unnoticed before. So the way EE decided to do that is really fascinating for me because he wanted to trying to do something different or trying to tell people something, and it's good enough for me to do it. So very interesting the way of thinking.
Yeah, and it's an interesting depiction on the different way how a child actually sees the world. Like
Yeah.
everything that he photographs is something like completely pointless and absolutely normal for the adults, but he sees something hidden, something that is worth photographing in like people's at the back of people's heads and like staircases and all of that.
Yeah, that
It's very
kid.
much avant-garde, like the headmaster states.
Yeah, that kid, he's the most detached from everybody else. He's just basically minding his own business and doing these childish shenanigans, learning things, and adults are doing the adult life thing, bickering and all that. I got that feeling very strongly.
Yeah, there's a certain type of innocence in him.
Mm.
But to get us back on
Yep.
track, we have been talking about a lot of two great directors, but what do you guys think? Not now asking whatever you like the movies, but what are their chances in out there in the world? Like, do these films have a staying power or legacy, or will these be forgotten?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I would say that they shouldn't be because I think when you watch, especially for me, Edward Young's films, and actually no, all of them actually, you get a sense of they feel very prescient now because the modern life, the way that we are kind of the direction that we're going and the way we're living, I think that this has a lot to say about that. And even something like Summer at Grandpa's, like you mentioned, like that's that's experience of kids playing in the summer. Like kids don't have that now. So I think for people to see something like that, I would hope that it would resonate with them when they watch it and they think like, oh yeah, this is an important kind of thing to document and understand. And I think there's a lot of themes throughout the films that a lot of people will definitely resonate with if they watch them. Whether or not they will watch them is another question, but I think if people see them, then they will connect with them. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah, I like to be optimistic and maybe say that these films will keep living on. I hope that Triple H will be still going strong and releasing a couple of movies every now and then, and so keeping that back catalog lit.
Mm.
Yeah, from these movies, well, EE is like the easiest one to have a legacy, because the biggest push for an individual film is behind that one.
Yeah.
So most likely, most people will if we would look at this statistically, the statistics that someone will see EE is like the highest.
Right.
When it comes to kind of borrowing a note from you, Nick, if people see these films, will they then have a legacy? I do think that this holds true for City of Sadness and Summer at Grand Pass, but unfortunately, I can't necessarily see that for Mahong, which I do feel is kind of a film that is too easy to just see once and then bypass, and that may also be like the film's fate for me also.
No, I was just gonna say, and I think that is evident in the fact that it's so hard to find, and there's not very many prints of it. So I think that you have some data to support your.
Yeah.
And then some directors like Tsai Ming Liang who are now not even willing to have any kind of a home release. You gotta go to the theater to see my film, type of thing. There's some of this artistic thing going on, of course. Some people don't really care to have this DVD release as home releases whatsoever.
Which is fair, actually. There is a real point seeing a movie in theaters versus seeing it at your home from a TV or a laptop.
Yeah, just to add on that, EE, I think it's most definitely, and many of these films, if not all of them that we watched, are such films that should be watched on the big screen if possible.
Yeah, I think Mahjong translates the best for TV screen.
Yeah, maybe.
But like you said, EE and City of Sadness are so, like, you are definitely missing out if you don't see them in theaters.
All right, Henrik, let's complete the sentence.
got a bit career around there, I must confess. So, complete the sentence. You really know you are watching the Taiwanese New Wave when?
You really know you're watching Taiwanese New Wave when the camera doesn't move for a very, very, very long time.
Well, wow, this is hard. You really know you are watching. Yeah. Wow. I don't know. You really know you watch a City of Sadness when when it's a sound movie but with a title card on it.
Yeah, indeed.
You really know you are watching these movies when your fear of militaristic Chinese police is being intersected by your rampant Hard Rock Cafe flashbacks. Because, oh boy, they really were pushing Hard Rock Cafe and Planet Hollywood during the mid-noughties.
All right.
But to get into perhaps a longer discussion and to harder questions even still. So, gang, it's all down the line here. Now, did you guys like tonight's movies?
Short answer, all of them, yes.
Of course.
Yeah, same here.
On my end, I hate to be the contrarian here.
Don't you touch on my mahjong.
I really loved City of Sadness, and I really did love EE, and I enjoyed hugely Summer at Grand Pass. But goddamn Mahjong, no, no,
Oh no.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
And continuing from that, would you guys watch these films again, or are these just one-time viewing?
No, absolutely. Anytime I can come back to these films.
Yeah, same. I mean, I think there's so many details to unpack, and there's a lot of things you can find throughout. So I would watch all of them again.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I necessarily wouldn't watch Mahjong again.
I think I've never had. I've never said in this podcast such a clear answer on these questions. Yes, I would definitely watch this again.
Yeah. For me, it's 3 out of 4.
Okay. Heretic.
Tell us what you really think, though.
Well, we actually find the answer in the next question. So at this point, you all been able to answer from your own perspective. Like, do you like the movies? And would you watch these again? But it's a different thing for you to watch a movie again and you just, recommending it to someone else.
Mm.
So guys, would you recommend these movies to other people?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we do on our YouTube channel. Mint
Yeah.
Volcano is recommending all these Taiwanese new wave films to people. So, I mean, I think it's important to recommend these films because, like you said, there are a lot of them are hard to find and they might not have staying power. But I think something that Luke said that really I thought was touching in this podcast was that he talked about how this is a reflection of people from Taiwan, and I think that that's an important thing to allow people from Taiwan to have this kind of voice globally. So I would that's why we both started the channel.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. I on my end, I do recommend City of Sadness, EE, and Sabanrat Karampas, but not necessarily Mahong. Like,
Well,
to me, the comedy does. I personally, I didn't really connect with the comedy. I get that it's supposed to be a dark comedy and it's not like laugh out funny, but for me, the comedic beats that I was able to spot were like the moment when one of the fumbling gangsters is just willy-nilly pointing the gun at his friend or the guy stepping on dog shit and stuff like that. And none of that worked for me. And something that wasn't a large problem for me, but something that I can believe, or it wasn't it was a problem, but it wasn't a deal breaker for me. But I believe it can very much be a deal breaker for a lot of people would be how the actual crime story in the film is being told. And this is something that I did see like coming up in the criticism towards this film repeatedly, that the crime story, the overall narrative of the film is too confusing. And I do disagree with that fact. I do think that the plot itself is pretty simple and it's not really confusing, but I do think that it's told messily as all hell. And when people complain that it's too hard to follow or it's confusing, I do think that the problem is that the way how it's being told to the audiences, it's just too messy, and people kind of mistake it for being too complicated or having too much moving parts in it.
well, A City of Sadness has a lot of family moving parts there. There's a lot of, I think I listed like 30 different characters, 35, 40 whatever characters to keep track of. Some of them not so important and more important characters as well. But yeah, you need to keep your lights on that you can follow these characters.
Yeah, I on the other hand, I didn't have that experience with City of Sadness.
Okay.
Like, to me, it was, or I found very easily that the narrative center on the three brothers, that the fourth one being something that is just kind of carried over in the film's narrative. That being the brother who has been messed in the head by the traumas that he has suffered during the war, and who just mostly is there. Like most of the time, the movie just forgets the fourth brother entirely. So three brothers to keep track on. They do have like they do get married. They are girlfriends. They are friends, and stuff happened to these to their personal contacts also. But like the narrative core is in those three brothers, and then there is like the other characters that just revolve around them. So it to me it wasn't really, I didn't feel that I had to struggle or really like pay any specific attention into the characters in City of Sadness. Like it was easy to follow if you just if you just zone into the three brothers.
We know, Henrik, every movie is easy to follow for you. Props to you. But yeah, I'll keep this my version short. Would I recommend these films? All of them? Yes.
I would definitely recommend this movie to anyone else. who wanted to know about Taiwan and also about cinemas, because it's not only telling story about Taiwanese people, it's also transform the way movie could be made in some ways, like in terms of cinematography, in terms of composition, or the story, how the story is being told. Because in this kind of movie, like you often not seeing the main characters. I mean, the story is not driven by the main character. It's the people around him, and oftentimes you can see the main character is just a outsider or even an observer to seeing things happen. So you have to keep your head on those characters beside the main characters. Sometimes the other one is more important than the main character himself. So you really miss out sometimes. Doesn't really easy to follow. But it also is representing a new possibility of film could be made. So also it's introducing a lot of Taiwanese history. So it's good to introduce to people to who wanted to get known about Taiwan. So yeah, of course.
Mm.
And also Edward Young, I believe because he living in United States, well, his movie is more talking more modernized world. It's more universal for people all around the world. So his movie is more internationally, and his movie is more easily to have common feeling.
I guess that's partly intentional as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
Should we put the films in order of preference?
Wow.
It's like shuffling your babies. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, they're all rated pretty highly for me, but I would go City of Sadness, then Summer at Grandpa's, then Mahjong, and then EE at the top. And you can tell I'm a Edward Yang fanboy.
So EE is your top, right? And
Yeah.
okay.
Mm.
For me, it's really difficult to make it order, but yeah, EE definitely would be the top of my life, and then maybe City of Sadness because really tell a lot of stories, and then could be Mahjong, and then Summer and Grandpa's.
Yeah. In terms of what I would the most likely pop on, regardless of how good the films might be, it's most easy for me to put on maybe A Summer at Grandpa's, and then followed by Mahjong, and then E, and then City of Sadness. But as far as like what did I like the most, I guess E and Mahjong, A Summer at Grandpa's, and A City of Sadness.
And for me, from top to bottom order, it would be City of Sadness, followed really closely by EE, then Summer and Mahjong as the fourth one.
Cool. Of course, we would like to give the opportunity for our guests to explain if they have any projects going on. I'm sure you do, and where people can find you. So maybe starting with Luke.
Well, I'm looking for independent movie making in New York City because I really want to keep doing movies, even well, like Nick is in Taiwan. So I still wanted to make it short features on like any kind of possibility. So I'm looking for a chance to make movies, videos here in New York. So if anyone who is interested in collaborate, making some interesting video together can connect me. Yeah.
How do
Or
they contact you, Luke?
how do they contact me? They just Google Luke Liu, Luke Liu, then probably can find me in Facebook or YouTube, or you can go to me and Nick's YouTube channel, Mick Volcano, so you can find us. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, as a like a small time video maker myself, if you ever happen to go, pay any attention to Finland, just drop me a note.
drop me a note as well.
fully open for a collaboration.
Same here.
Great.
Yeah, awesome.
And where can we find Nick?
Yeah, so you can check out our YouTube channel again. I'll plug it one more time. Nick Volcano. You can find it And we have some of our short films on there. You can also find me on Instagram at NICKVAKY. Also, my website, nickvakey.com. There's like a lot of the short films that Luke and I have worked on are on there. And we actually have one final film that we shot right before Luke left for New York that I am currently editing. And so we'll have a new work coming out soon. Hopefully it'll be in some festivals or something, but just stay tuned, I guess.
Yeah, one key question bothers my mind. Mint Volcano.
Yeah.
Why don't you guys have more views? Like the quality of the material. And yeah, I hope you guys get a bigger following. You deserve that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. All right. This was fantastic. Of course, in time-wise, going through these 4 gargantuan movies is kind of impossible, but we did what we could, which is awesome. And yeah, what did you think, dear listeners? 5-star ratings or thumbs up, thumbs down? What do you prefer? Come to tell us on our social media pages. And yeah, please give us a rating on Apple Podcasts because it really helps others like yourself to find the Flick Lab. We have also started on Patreon. A bit rocky start, but we have one Patreon there, and head over to patreon.com/theflicklab to support us over there. We're actually putting some extra content there, so you can find more babbling from Henrik and me right there.
Yeah, and remember, the more you give, the more we are gone. So
yeah, you can send us feedback, lab@theflicklab.com. You can follow me on Twitter. Unfortunately, I'm always trying to find ways to get out of there, but I'm there. If you can type my name correctly, good luck with that. Henrik, where can people find you?
you can find me in the miraculous world of Finnish filmmaking right after the current plague finally eases up.
Okay, and our theme music was created by Nick Grivell, and special thanks to she. She read out loud the names of the actors in these films, but unfortunately we didn't have really too much time on Taiwanese or Chinese lessons here. But
yeah, it was hugely appreciated.
Absolutely.
Still.
In our next episode, we'll be discussing what, Henrik?
I guess cinema in some form.
I was thinking that we could take a look into the Oscar-nominated international films that are actually available, because I count there's 2 films available. How does that sound? Less than 4?
Yeah, that's true, and why not? Because if there is a film award that I really don't care about, it's the goddamn Oscar.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. See you in a fortnight.
Until then.
Tell us what you really think, though.
On my end, I hate to be the contrarian here.
Don't you touch on my mahjong.
All right. Thanks, guys.